welcome to another episode of Let's Clean a Record. Today, however, we're not going to clean a record. We're going to show you how to clean the various interconnects in your stereo system. I'm talking specifically about the RCA connectors, as well as the jacks into which we put those connectors, speaker cable lugs, as well as your AC cord pins. We have everything set up to show you the various ways to do that. So I want to talk about the most important thing first. You really have two different categories of methods to clean these various pins, these metal parts. One is more along the lines of a chemical reaction, something like DeoxIT. You can also use a more abrasive approach, something like a liquid metal cleaner or a piece of steel wool. And by the way, if you use a steel wool, make sure it's the most fine steel wool you can get. 4 times aught is what they call superfine, which, by the way, was my nickname in high school.
Get out.
Not true. You're also going to need various accoutrements to get into the nooks and crannies, so I like to use cotton swabs, traditional Q-tip kind of things. You can also get these sorts from stores that sell bits to clean pew-pews, and a nice soft brush makes sense, and of course you'll need some paper towels and some towels that you don't mind getting dirty. But here's the thing to keep in mind. When you're looking at a piece of metal to clean, you have to first decide if it's plated or not. And in the audiophile world, that plating is usually gold. The thing is, you cannot use any of these abrasive substances on anything that's plated. You're going to rip it right off. So that's important. If you're unsure if it's plated or not, go with it being plated and avoid the abrasive approach. Stick with something like DeoxIT. Speaking of DeoxIT, that's what it's called. This is D5. It's from a company called CAIG Labs. There are alternatives. In fact, I'll check my notes here. I was able to find a few. One from a company called Blue Horizon called Clean It. There's another from Vandenhall. We all know Vandenhall. They've been around the audiophile world for a long time. They have something called the Solution. That's a cleaner as well as a lubricant. To me, that's not so important, but if you do have plated surfaces and you're swapping out interconnects frequently, it maybe does make sense to have a lubricant in play, because otherwise, over time, you'll wear off that plate. And then, of course, there's DeoxIT. One thing that we're not talking about today are so-called enhancers. The cleaners that we're talking about are just designed to remove oxidation and any contaminants that's on the metal. The enhancers, and this is where you can possibly get into snake oilville, are intended to fill in the microscopic irregularities on the surface of the metal. Some even claim to be able to manipulate the magnetic field. A couple that are in this market, Cardis has something called Contact Conditioner. There's Furatech and their Nano Liquid. And then for $350 for a 5 milliliter bottle, there's Contact Enhancer is the name of the company, and their product is called Nanoparticle Solution. We will save any enhancers for another day. We're just going to focus on cleaning. So, we talked about plated versus non-plated. Let's go through the best practices for cleaning these various connection points. Let's get to it. Now, interconnects, your typical RCA type interconnects. This is a pair of Nordost Blue Angel. I think I've had these since the early 90s. You can see they've oxidized quite a bit over the years. So let's take one end and show you the process. First of all, these are absolutely plated. Is it gold or some sort of alloy that might contain some gold? I'm not sure exactly what it is, but the point is, when you plate these metals, it's probably just pot metal underneath, but when you put that plating on there, it is so very thin. Even the slightest abrasive from something like that steel wool will rip that plating right off, so you want to avoid that. That's why we're going to use a chemical process to remove that oxidation, and that's what the DeoxIT's made for. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is just get initial spray on there. And it's a good idea to let it sit for a few minutes, so cue the dancing kitty. Okay, now that it's had a few minutes to sit and begin to deoxidize, is that a word? No.
I'm going to say deoxidize.
Deoxidize. Yeah, we're going to go with that. First of all, be prepared. You're going to want to hit it more than one time. 2 or 3 times is absolutely acceptable. So once it's begun to dry, I like to hit it again. Now you can take a Q-tip and start to do your thing on there, and you'll see some of the contaminants and oxidation come off. But you'll also notice that it's difficult to get a regular sized Q-tip down deep around that barrel, so I like to use a soft toothbrush for that purpose. Go ahead and hit it again. Give it a good brushing. Now this is an abrasive, obviously, but it's a very soft one. I mean, heck, the Q-tip is an abrasive as well, but it's not going to remove any of that plating. And you want to try to clean both the barrel and the sleeve as best you can. Let's hit it one more time. By the way, you might ask, how often do we do this? Well, not very often. I think once a year is just fine, and it can certainly go every couple of years between cleanings. Basically though, around time of spring cleaning, when you might actually take apart your system and take the components off their shelves and really give everything a thorough dusting and wipe down, that might be the time to take out your interconnects, speaker cable and AC plugs, or mains cables if you're on the other side of the pond, and give them a good clean. One last shot. And there you have it. By the way, I recommend waiting several minutes before you reinsert this into the jack. Definitely don't want to put any liquid in there. Let's take a closer look. You can see the difference. Much cleaner. Did the trick.
Well done.
All right, let's go on to the RCA jacks. Okay, fellas, what we're looking at here is the back of a solid-state amplifier that I used many, many years ago. It's a Marantz MA700. Really cool monoblock, actually, if you need a whole bunch of power. But the reason I chose this particular component to demonstrate how to clean the RCA jacks is because we have 2 different kind of jacks represented here. I'm not sure if you can see it, but these 2 jacks are plated, some sort of alloy. These 4 are not. So we can take different approaches to each of them. The plated ones, just like the interconnects that you just saw, must be cleaned with something chemically based, like the DeoxIT. However, we can use our steel wool on these guys. So let's demonstrate that now. I'm just going to focus on one here. And I do like to, you don't want to get this spray all over the back of your equipment there. So some guys will put blue tape around parts that they're cleaning. Nothing wrong with that. I think you can just hold up a rag and it'll work. And again, we can wait a few minutes and let that deoxidation process kick in. Hit it first with the Q-tip. One question you might ask, does this improve the sound? Well, that's arguable. The enhancers, that's really arguable. But just the process of cleaning. Well, I will say this. If you allow a significant amount of oxidation to build up on your connection points, you will negatively impact the sound. If you just want to be extra clean about it, hey, that's all right as cleaners, but it's a minimal difference. Now, once we get to the AC plugs, I'm going to change my tune on that, so hold tight and you'll see. And there you have it. Probably tough to tell on the camera, but this is definitely cleaner than that one. So, ready to go. Now, I'm not going to show you the second one because it's the same darn thing, but let's go over to these. These have no plating on them. They're just straight metal. I don't want to say that the color of the metal will always tell you, but when we see RCA jacks that are silver like this, that's an indication that there's no plating on them. It does not hurt at all to start with the chemical cleaning process. We'll just pick this one here. If you really want to get it nice, take your 4/0 steel wool, back and forth motion. Also on the front of the jack. There we go. I recommend that not be your last step. There may be little tiny pieces of steel wool there you don't want hanging around, so hit it one more time. Wipe it clean, and there you have it. And that's how we clean an RCA jack.
Awesome.
Okay, next up, speaker cables. This is an old pair of XLO cables I think I had back in the 90s when I was biamping. When it comes to speaker cables...
You have a biamp system. What are you talking about?
Sorry. Okay.
It's been on our minds.
By-wire cables. Okay. But regardless, the thing with speaker cables, and there's a lot of different types, lugs like this, there's bananas, there's all different kinds of ways to connect the speaker cable between the speaker and the amplifier. And they can be plated. In this case, they're not. So, but do be careful about that. As I mentioned before, you don't want to rip that plating off. So these are solid, however, so we're going to use both our steel wool and maybe even the flits. Let's see how the steel wool does the trick first. Just like before, I like to give it a quick clean first. We're just going to pick one. Let's go with the green. And again, you can give it a few minutes to do its work if you like. There's definitely some oxidation on there. Super fine. Put some elbow grease behind it. Take every flat surface one at a time. There we go. That looks pretty good. Go ahead and give it one last shot to clean anything off. Left behind. There you have it. Let's take a look at the difference. Bright, shiny, clean. Looks much better, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
All right. Next up, mains cables. Okay, when it comes to AC cords, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, you're certainly not within any hi-fi system. You're never going to have plated metal on the AC plug. It's always going to be solid, so you can use the more aggressive and abrasive methods to clean it. Now, this is sort of a typical audiophile quality mains cable, and very often they can be taken apart. This is one such version. You can pull out those screws and you can remove the individual pins and go to town on them. In fact, we'll put a link below to an earlier video that we did on cleaning these pins. Actually ended up using a Dremel tool on it. But you really don't have to go to that extent to get them clean. And very often, depending on the brand that you're using, they don't come apart. So here's what I did. First of all, these are already pretty clean. I cleaned this at some time in the past. So what I did is go through the box of cables and came up with one. Obviously, we would never use this in a hi-fi system, and I'm pretty sure this extension cord is older than me. I think my mother bought this at some point.
Oh my goodness.
But I'm choosing it because it's heavily oxidized and quite dirty, so I think it'll demonstrate the difference. And it's always, obviously, this is sort of contained within a rubberized, plasticky kind of material. There's no taking this apart. Lots of, even high-end AC cords can be built in this manner. So if you don't want to take it apart, or you're dealing with something like this, that's what we'll demonstrate here, is how to get this clean. We're going to use the Flitz metal polish, and let's show you how that works right now. Just like before, I might start off with the oxidizing spray. This is never a bad way to start. Let's just focus on one of those pins for today's demonstration. So you can use simple Q-tips for this. It's kind of a green color, and you're going to see that color change as it comes in contact with the metal. Don't worry about that. You're never going to not see that change. That's a normal reaction. However, what you should do is think of this liquid much as a liquid version of that steel wool. There are fine micro abrasives in this metal designed to polish metals. It's most often used on boats, believe it or not. And you will go through, I got it on the other side there, you will go through plenty of the Q-tips if you use that method. As you can see,
It's because you're obsessive.
Yeah, probably true. It can be difficult to get into those narrow, thin spaces. So I'm also going to demonstrate how we can use that same steel wool that we used before. I don't want to press too hard here. This is a cheap extension cord. I'll bend the plug, but you get the idea. Some more of the Flitz. Go to work on the other side. You know, when it comes to interconnects and speaker cable, I'm of the belief that, yeah, there are differences. There are absolutely differences. Every change makes a difference. But as to whether that difference is an improvement or not, really is system, room, and ear dependent as far as I'm concerned. Meaning to say, I have tried literally $20,000 speaker cables right next to speaker cables that wouldn't go for more than $100 or $200 and decided that the cheaper ones sounded better. It's more of a tuning process in my mind. But when it comes to mains cables, I do think there's a bigger difference. It's easier to hear a difference. And further, the process of polishing these pins produces an undeniably positive result. Tell me it's psychosomatic if you wish, but that's my experience.
I don't think so. I heard it from the kitchen when we did this in Monterey.
That's right. If you link to the episode we previously did on going to town on these pins with a Dremel, it is true. Periodically, I would recommend stopping, kind of getting the dirty bits of what you've been polishing removed before you go at it again. But you know what? I think for our purposes today, this will demonstrate what we're talking about. I like to hit it one final time with the DeoxIT. Well, Mom, if you're up there watching, look how shiny I made your pin. But you can see the difference, right?
Yeah.
Look at that.
For sure.
So,
nice.
That's how we polish our pins. All right, fellas. Well, I hope you enjoyed our little demonstration today, and we will see you all at the next record.